Tennessee Titans fans, we got great news on Monday. Treylon Burks is back. I'm going to break it all down, along with all the other Titans news from Monday on today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Let's get it.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. It was a big Monday of Tennessee Titans news. Treylon Burks is back at Tennessee Titans practice. We're going to go over that. Kyle Phillips injury update as well. And in a major surprise, Dillon Radunz was activated off the PUP. We'll talk about what that means for the roster. And we got news that Hassan Haskins will be going on injured reserve. Got way more roster news to talk about, practice updates as well to go along with all of that. Before we get into it, do want to thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen every day. Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round on all apps and always for free. You're not going to beat that anywhere else. Make sure that you get subscribed. Stay subscribed to the Locked On Titans podcast, where it's your team every day. Shout out to my everydayers out there. I got a lot of great content coming up for you guys in the next few days. Tomorrow, we're going to analyze the 53-man roster. Then we're going to talk about waivers and practice squad options. Friday is going to be Fantasy Football Friday. We're going to talk all the Titans fantasy football outlooks. Monday, I'll get my record prediction to you guys. Tuesday, we're doing team awards. And then it's time to get into our prep for the first regular season game of the year. So excited for everything coming up this season. We're going to have game reaction Monday. We're going to have Tic Tac Tuesdays, where I break down the film and do my all 22 review. We're going to have What's Next Wednesdays, where we start looking forward at the next game. Crossover Thursday for a behind the enemy line scouting report. And Friday is Game Plan Friday, breaking down all of the latest and how the Titans can win each game. I know it's a little bit of a long intro, but I want to just let you guys know everything I got coming up for you. Again, hit that thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button, and let's dive into this content. Treylon Burks was back at practice. He said before practice in his press conference, I feel great. So feels very fortunate that he didn't get a season-long injury, the worst of what it could be. So Treylon Burks was pretty grateful, pretty excited, and then he's back out on the practice again. Treylon Burks is so critical to this offense. This offense can only operate with two high-level wide receivers, with all the 12 personnel that the Titans run, with the combo routes of having the intermediate crosser and then the deep post and all the things that the Titans want to do. You have to have two viable threats out there within the Titans offense. So absolutely fantastic. It looks like, based on what we're seeing, there's a pretty good chance that Treylon Burks might be able to play week one. I mean, you don't want to speak in certainty, but the fact that he's out on the practice field looking smooth, didn't look like he had any knee brace on or anything like that, that's all great news. Trending to play week one. Treylon Burks is back. But that's not the only wide receiver injury news that we have to discuss. Also want to update you guys on Kyle Phillips. So, according to reports, Kyle Phillips was in a knee brace in the locker room before practice on Monday. Not only that, but he said he can walk fine in his knee brace. It's all pretty concerning. The reality is, where Treylon Burks may have been able to go towards the beginning of his injury timeline and be ready earlier than expected, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case with Kyle Phillips. It looks like Kyle Phillips is probably going to be on the far side of his timeline, probably closer to 6 to 8 months. And look, you look at the injury history of Kyle Phillips and how long he was out last year. Again, he only played in 4 games. You got to be careful with Kyle Phillips. I think that's the right thing to do, is to be careful with him. is to not rush him back too soon. And that's why I have been saying all along that I think the right move is for the Titans to put Kyle Phillips on IR after the 53-man roster is set. So I said yesterday that I would expect 6 wide receivers, none of them being Kyle Phillips, and Kyle Phillips to go on IR. And maybe I didn't properly articulate my point. And with all of the words I say on here and how much I talk, that is shocking to me, but there was some confusion. So let me go back through what I'm expecting the Titans to do here, okay? I tweeted it out on Monday morning as well, at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter. Follow me there. Follow the show on Facebook, at Locked On Titans Pod, at Locked On Titans on TikTok, at Locked On Titans on Instagram, trying to be a full social media juggernaut going forward. But what the Titans are going to do is, and what I expect them to do is, they are going to have Kyle Phillips on the initial 53-man roster. So what I should have explained is, I think the Titans will keep 7 wide receivers to start, but then immediately after that, put Kyle Phillips on the injured reserve. That would prevent them from having to waive Colton Dow or Kearis Jackson and be worried about whether another team would steal them away on waivers. This way, if the Titans go with 7 wide receivers, and then once the 53-man roster is set, put Kyle Phillips on IR, then you don't have to worry about losing Dow or losing Jackson when you waive them and hope that you can get them back. You don't got to do that. So maybe I didn't articulate my point as well. I talked about the possibility of waiving one of those guys, seeing if they can get them through. But the way the Titans should really do this is keep 7 wide receivers. Then once the roster is set, put Phillips on IR. And the way that they can do that and get away with it is the Titans don't have a kicker on the roster right now. So what the Titans should do is the Titans should not add a kicker to the roster on waivers on Wednesday. The Titans should wait until Thursday or Friday, see which kickers clear through waivers, and then they can add that kicker as they put Kyle Phillips on IR after the 53-man roster is already set. That way, Kyle Phillips can return in 4 weeks. So a little bit of a roster mechanics there, a little bit of a way for the Titans to protect their young wide receivers in Colton Dow and Kearis Jackson, but at the same time, make sure that they, operate the roster in the right way and can add a kicker and can bring Kyle Phillips back later in the year. Because if you put Kyle Phillips on IR before the 53-man roster is set, then he's out for the entire season, which is the case with Hassan Haskins. And the Titans put Hassan Haskins on injured reserve, ending his season on Monday afternoon. I'm going to talk about that towards the end of the show. But next, Dillon Radunz activated off PUP. I did not expect this. I did not think it would happen this early. This is good news for the Titans as they need help on the offensive line. So we're going to talk about Dillon Radunz, but before we get into that, do want to let you guys know that today's episode of Locked On Titans is brought to you by Gametime. Look, if you guys are looking for last-minute tickets, you got to go to the Gametime app. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I bought some Reds tickets at the last minute, kind of a spontaneous purchase, you could say. I did that a couple of weeks ago. It was really easy to find the tickets that I wanted, really easy to see the actual price of the tickets. And Gametime has this awesome function where you're able to actually get a view of what you're going to be seeing from your seats. And unlike some other apps I've used, it is accurate. You actually get a good idea of what you're going to be looking at. Forget planning months in advance. Nobody wants to do that. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And it's not just football. Of course, they're going to have deals on football tickets, but basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, more. The Gametime guarantee, see how you can put those two together, though, means you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime's going to give you a credit for 110% of the difference. Snag tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We just talked about Treylon Burks' injury update, and man, it is great that he's back at practice, looking good, looking healthy. On the other hand, Kyle Phillips, not looking so good. I talked about some cap mechanics or some roster mechanics the Titans could use to keep Colton Dow, keep Kearis Jackson, not subject them to waivers, but also be able to get Kyle Phillips back from IR without his season ending by putting him on IR before they set the 53-man roster. So talked about that, but we got a lot more Titans news to dive into today. We're going to talk about Dillon Radunz. We're going to talk about Hassan Haskins going to IR. We're talking about Monty Rice, Chigakonkwo, and Jalen Duncan coming back to practice. And the weird thing that Monty Rice had to say, or the weird situation, I'll call it, with Monty Rice and what's going on there. And I'm going to update you guys on who I think is going to be cut next, because the Titans still have to cut about 27, 28 guys by 4 p.m. on Tuesday. So we're going to get into a ton. Let's start with Dillon Radunz here. Dillon Radunz was activated off PUP. He tore his ACL in week 15 last year against the Los Angeles Chargers, and I have to admit, I was wrong. I did not think that Radunz would be back from PUP before the start of the regular season. Didn't think that was going to be a possibility. Thought he would be on PUP to start the year. And when we talk about all these roster projections and who I think is going to make the initial 53-man roster, did not have Dillon Radunz factored in because I did not think that he was going to be activated. But that's exactly what happened on Monday. Good for Dillon Radunz. I mean, Mike Vrabel even said it was very encouraging that he's back this soon. He said Dillon Radunz has worked extremely hard to get back so far. That's absolutely fantastic. So Radunz was back on the practice field. He did have a knee brace on, that left knee that he had surgery on. He was running drills, though, hitting bags, doing things, and that's great for the Titans' offensive line that clearly is going to need reinforcements throughout the year. And think about it this way, guys. Dillon Radunz may have been a disappointment up to this point, but he had a pretty good showing in 2021 when he played left tackle against San Francisco. If all you guys remember that, I did a film breakdown on it. I thought in the 10 snaps that he did get to play over Dennis Daly, it was blatantly obvious that he was a better player than Dennis Daly. And it's absurd that he had to sit on the bench all year behind Daly when he was a second-round left tackle out of college and was better than Dennis Daly all along. So it's unfortunate that 10 snaps into the opportunity that he finally got to play left tackle, he got hurt, but those 10 snaps look better than what Dennis Daly gave the team all year. So I'm not saying that Dillon Radunz is going to come in right away and change the game for the Titans. I'm just saying that he's going to be a happily received reinforcement for the team once he gets ready. But with that being said, we have to pump the brakes a little bit, okay? We have to pump the brakes just a little bit. The guy is coming back really early off ACL. I don't think you should expect Dillon Radunz to be able to play, like actually play on the field for about a month, okay? He's going to have to get in better shape. He's going to have to get in football shape. He's going to have to get used to the contact. He's going to have to get up to speed on the new offense. And he's got guys in front of him who are probably going to play in front of him, like Daniel Brunskill at right guard, Chris Hubbard, maybe even a guy like Justin Murray at right guard or right tackle who could be an option over him. Now that the roster is going to get cut down, a guy like Xavier Newman-Johnson, a guy like Corey Levin could fill in those interior spots at right guard. So I would give Radunz some time, guys, before you actually expect anything from him. But once he is himself, he's fully healthy, he's back, he could be an option for the Titans at right guard if Brunskill's knee injury continues and lingers throughout the year. If Chris Hubbard isn't getting it done at right tackle, I don't think that Nicholas Petit-Frere is so great that a fully healthy Dillon Radunz in his third season couldn't challenge him a little bit, even after week 6. So just keep your eye on that, but I would pump the brakes on any expectations for Dillon Radunz anytime soon. But the fact that he's back already is definitely a surprise, and it throws a wrench into the roster math, right? I had a guy like Xavier Newman-Johnson making the roster. I had a guy like Justin Murray making the roster as an 8th and 9th offensive lineman. Well, now Dillon Radunz is back. He's probably going to take one of those spots on the 53-man roster. So probably going to get one of those wrong no matter what. But I didn't expect to go 53 for 53 either. So I guess that is what it is. Do want to mention one more thing here. Hassan Haskins placed on IR. I didn't have Hassan Haskins making the roster because of the injury. If you look back at the very first preseason game, on that comeback throw that Malik Willis threw to Chris Moore to open the game. Hassan Haskins injured something on his upper body really bad, and he laid on the field for a while holding it. He ran the ball a little bit after that, but after that game, I don't think that we've seen Hassan Haskins in practice or anything. Look, this doesn't necessarily mean that Hassan Haskins has a season-ending injury that he could never come back from, but the Titans simply don't value him enough to keep him on the active roster and then place him on IR. They simply don't, okay? Look, I think Hassan Haskins is underrated by the fan base. No, he's not a good running back. No, he has no wiggle. He has no burst, but he is a dynamic special teams player. He was second on the team in special teams tackles last year with 13. That sort of stuff is so underrated by the casual fan, and coaches care. Coaches care about special teams even if you don't. So Hassan Haskins does have value, but again, you can find, when I talked about Haskins yesterday, when we talked about the roster and who I think makes the 53-man roster, I didn't think Haskins would make it because at the end of the day, while he does provide tremendous special teams value, he doesn't give you much as an actual running back. And with Julius Chestnut and Tajay Spears this year, they have the running back talent that they need. And the special teams value you can find elsewhere. I would rather have Luke Gifford as a linebacker instead of Hassan Haskins for special teams. I would rather keep an extra safety. I would rather bring Josh Kalu back, who was released or waived by the Washington Commanders, and have him as a special teams option. Ben Neiman, a guy like Chance Campbell. You know what I'm saying? You could find even Julius Chestnut. Mike Vrabel raved about Julius Chestnut's improvements on special teams. You can find the special teams value elsewhere. Okay? So, Hassan Haskins will go on injured reserve because it's during the preseason. He will be out for the year. He is not eligible to come back. So, let me say this, though. At one point in time, Kyle Pecco went on injured reserve during the preseason and then did play later in the year. What can happen is you can do an injury settlement where you pay the player some money and it allows them to come off injured reserve. They would have to go to another team before they could come back to you, but I guess that could happen later in the year. So when people say his season is done, put an asterisk next to it. There is like a weird roster rule where a season could continue, but the odds are a season's over and Hassan Haskins won't play this year as he's placed on IR. But we got a lot more to talk about, okay? There were cuts that happened on Monday. 3 players got cut. I'll tell you who those are. We had 3 other players who we haven't talked about yet come back to practice, and Monty Rice's situation is weird. He wasn't injured, but missed a bunch of time. So we're going to talk about that. And I'll tell you who I think is going to get cut on Tuesday morning. So a lot to discuss here. Before we get into it, though, I do want to thank you guys for making the Locked On Titans podcast your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure you get subscribed, stay subscribed to the Locked On Titans podcast. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about Treylon Burks being back at practice. That is great news for the Titans. He's so important to the team. Really dodged a bullet there. But on the other side, Kyle Phillips has a brace on his knee. Wouldn't expect him back anytime soon. We talked about some roster mechanics the Titans can use to deal with that. Dillon Radunz off PUP. Hassan Haskins on IR. But there's more roster moves to dive into before we get into it. Just want to let you guys know, tomorrow's show, we're going to be breaking down the initial 53-man roster. Then after that, on Thursday, we're going to talk about waiver wire options. We're going to talk about practice squad options for the Titans. Then on Friday, we're going to have our Tennessee Titans fantasy football episode. Talk all things fantasy football. Going to try to have a special guest for you guys as well. Got a lot of stuff next week as it's game week finally for the Titans. So just make sure that you stay locked into the Locked On Titans podcast. But Monty Rice was back at practice. He played 7 snaps against the Vikings. Then we haven't seen him since. And what was weird about it was Monty Rice told reporters on Monday that he wasn't injured. So this whole time, Monty Rice has missed, nearly 2 weeks, and it hasn't been with an injury. Monty Rice was asked, if it wasn't an injury, then what's the reason that you haven't played since Minnesota or Chicago? He said, quote, to John Glennon, he said, quote, life and God. That's the best way to put it, end quote. Okay. I don't know really how to react to that. Monty Rice, you haven't been injured. We haven't seen you in 2 weeks. Where you been? Life and God. Okay. I think Monty Rice is going to get cut. Maybe he won't. Him coming back to practice makes it less likely that he gets cut. But, I don't know. I'd rather have Ben Neiman. I'd rather have Chance Campbell. I'd rather keep Luke Gifford because he's a better special teams player. The Titans have enough linebacker talent and they have enough special teams talent where I just don't see the need to I'd rather keep depth on the trenches, a 9th offensive lineman, a 6th defensive lineman, a 5th safety. I would just rather use that roster spot elsewhere. I don't know. Something weird there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Monty Rice get cut. Chikakonkwo was back on the field, which is great news for the Titans. They need their pass catchers. Jalen Duncan was back on the practice field, maybe not as consequential, but good to see the rookie back out there to continue to develop. Arden Key did miss practice, though, with a calf injury. That's concerning. That's something to watch. Although Rashad Weaver's been good. But again, this highlights the need to keep Caleb Murphy on this roster. The Titans need the pass rush prowess. They can get special teams elsewhere, other positions. Okay? Anyways, with that, do want to go into the Titans cuts. So the Titans cut Josh Thompson, my first official miss on my 53-man roster. The injuries just never really allowed him to compete with the other defensive backs. He's just never healthy enough to really get out there and show what he can do. I talked about this yesterday. Mike Vrabel called Josh Thompson a core 4 special teamer because he can play punt and kickoff return and punt and kickoff coverage teams, which is huge. But again, the injury, he got a late start. He just never got up to speed. And then I would say Shaheem Carter now is the 5th safety with Mike Brown and Elijah Molden backing up Amani Hooker and Kevin Byard. I would say this opens the door for Shaheem Carter and Teron Davenport from ESPN. I said all that in the tweet on Monday, and Teron Davenport replied with some bullseyes. So feel like I might be on the right trail there. And of course, shout out to Teron, my favorite guy to kind of interact with from the beat, other than of course Tom Broom, my boss over at Sports Illustrated. That's my guy. But other than Josh Thompson, Alize Mack. Man, I finally figured out how to say Alize Mack's name right after a few months, and then he gets cut. SMH. And then Jonathan Ward, the running back, was cut as well, who everybody had high hopes for, but he got injured in the first preseason game. Haven't seen him since. All 3 of those guys were cut with an injury designation. So the injuries never really allowed them to get going. They've all been banged up a little bit, but that's 3 more cuts. So the Titans made 6 cuts on Sunday. They made 3 more cuts on Monday, and they placed Hassan Haskins on IR. So that's 10 players. They activated Dillon Radunz, so that's 9. So 9 spots. We've got 9 cuts, essentially, 9 removals from the roster at this time. There's a lot more to go. So I'm just going to quickly, here at the end of the episode, go through my list of guys who I think get cut on Tuesday. All right, and let me know if you disagree, agree down in the comments as I go through them. Jock Peterson, or Jacquez Patrick. Jock Peterson. I keep getting his name mixed up with the baseball player, Jock Peterson, whatever. Anyways, Jacquez Patrick, the running back, I think gets cut. I had Hassan Haskins, but he went on IR, so functions is the same way. He's not on the 53-man roster. Reggie Roberson and Treshawn Harrison at wide receiver. I hope to see those guys as practice squad options. Racy McMath, Mason Kinsey. Mason Kinsey plays defensive back for the Titans practice squad all the time. He's much more valuable to the Titans on practice squad. That's something that I recognized and read about and realized. So Mason Kinsey should be back on the practice squad as well. Thomas Odukoye, and I know he's a popular guy to make the roster, but as I explained recently on a show, my everydayers will remember. Excuse me. Thomas Odukoye is an international pathway program player. That means he has special roster rules. The Titans can keep Thomas Odukoye on the practice squad, and it doesn't count towards their practice squad roster. So you're only allowed to have 16 players on practice squad, but if one of them's Thomas Odukoye, because he's an international pathway guy, you can have 17. And the Titans love using that loophole to maximize their roster. And there are special exemptions where you can bring Odukoye up on the game day roster. So the Titans are not going to be risking losing Odukoye by not putting him on the 53-man roster. So I think Odukoye gets cut, but really what I mean is he just doesn't make the 53-man roster. But because he's an IPP guy, they could just put him directly to the practice squad and bring him up, and they have special rules there. So keep that in mind. To the offensive line, John Leglue, John Ojukwu, who's been injured all of training camp, it feels like, but I hope they bring him back on the PS. Jordan Roos, Xavier Newman-Johnson, again, because Radunz is back, I think Newman gets cut, but practice squad guy. Andrew Rupsich as well, who could also be a practice squad candidate. On defense, Naquan Jones, just been hurt too much. He did come back recently, but I think he's been beat out by Peko and Dwumfor. Jaleel Johnson, TK McClendon, Tyler Shelvin, Trevon Colley. Again, I like Peko. I like Dwumfor. I like Peavy over those guys, although Peavy did miss practice on Monday, so watch that. Okwe Anonu, Thomas Rush. I want to see Thomas Rush on the practice squad, though. I think they get cut. Again, Monty Rice. Otis Reese at linebacker. I think he's a practice squad candidate as well. Armani Marsh, Stephen Jones, Anthony Kendall. Anthony Kendall is a practice squad guy I'd be looking for. Tyreek Jones, Matthew Jackson. Those are guys that I think get cut on offense and defense on Tuesday. But I'll be back tomorrow night to break it all down, to see who really did get cut, who makes the 53-man roster, what's going to happen. Make sure that you guys don't miss it. Again, stay locked in to the Locked On Titans podcast. Get subscribed. Stay subscribed. It's your team every day. That's going to do it for me today, though, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.